exactly right. Exactly right. They eat. It's one of the only predators that does this. And they usually crack open the shell with a rock that they hammer against the shell. And when they're swimming, if they gather something up and swim to the surface, they tuck that crab underneath a flap of skin. So they have like this little shopping bag under their skin. health of the slough. Well, engine of luck. So that's the first chapter. to the slough from Monterey Bay. Because of, remember, the slough was an intertidal area, so lots of cold water flows in every twice a day, basically. But and this cold water. And every time these passengers took a trip on the slough, they had little counters in their hand. And what they did was that the captain of the boat. Glenbrook says, mimic the view. He ate the crabs. Okay, you're getting close. Agitation of the water? No. Glenbrook, yes, fourth graders. Okay, so let me tell you, Glenbrook and who is it, STEM early college are pretty close. Basically, what Brent decided to do was to vary the size of the crab that he put in the bucket. So, for instance, in an ecosystem where sea otters live, the crabs are probably going to be pretty small because the sea otters eat all the biggest crabs first. So to mimic the presence of sea otters in one bucket, Brent put a small crab. Okay, you got it? In an ecosystem where no sea otters live, he put a really large crab because without sea otters, crabs will grow bigger and bigger and bigger. More crabs eat more sea hares, right? You see where we're going with this? So buckets that mimic the presence of otters had teeny crabs. Buckets that had no sea otters present in that ecosystem had large crabs. And guess what Brent found? Well, he found that the buckets with the large crabs, no sea otters present, those crabs gobbled up all the sea hares, which allowed algae to grow on the seagrass, and the seagrass was nearly dead. But the buckets with the small crabs that mimic the presence of otters, a lot of sea hares still thrived, and they were able to clean the algae off the seagrass, so the seagrass thrived. So he proved his theory in the lab. But that's not enough for science. You have to take your lab experiments and move them to the field. So Brent repeated his entire experiment in the slough. But the first thing they had to do was to figure out, in the slough, sea otters swim wherever they want, right? So the thing he had to figure out was how to keep the sea otters out of certain areas. So he kind of had the reverse problem. So he and his fellow scientists built a cage that looked like this. This one is actually upside down. Imagine turning it over and taking these feet and digging them into the mud. And this bottom part of the chicken wire would also dig into the mud. Otters are smart, crafty animals, and they had to do everything they could to keep them out. They welded the rebar together. They fastened the chicken wire on with lots and lots and lots of zip ties, which nobody can break. And they sunk these cages at the bottom of the slough to keep the sea otters out. Some of these cages had crabs in them. Some of them did not. The ones with crabs pretty much had dead seagrass. The ones where sea otters were, the places where sea otters were allowed to roam free, healthy seagrass. So the experiment in the field showed Brent the same result as the experiment in the lab. He got the same results both times, which absolutely shocked him. So he had to do some serious thinking. Remember, I told you that he was trained to look at forces at the bottom of the food chain for what affected seagrass. He wasn't prepared to look at predators. So he had to completely rethink what he learned in graduate school. He had to think outside the box. He had to accept a brand new idea that was staring him in the face that completely surprised him. And lucky for us and for sea otters, he did just that. He was able to change his mind. So he developed, what he actually discovered was a new trophic cascade. That might be a new term to a bunch of you. Trophic cascade. Trophic refers to the different levels of the food chain. And a cascade is kind of like a waterfall. Think of it just flowing over the cliff, okay? So a trophic cascade is the same thing. The predator, sea otters, eat the crabs. The crabs eat the sea hares. The sea hares eat the algae off the seagrass, and the seagrass is at the bottom of the trophic cascade. So, by having sea otters in the ecosystem, they are controlling the crab population. By controlling the crab population, more sea hares are allowed to grow, and the more sea hares we have, the more algae gets cleaned off the seagrass. So let me read the very end of the book, again, in honor of World Read Aloud Day. Brent's trophic cascade discovery shows that the recovery of top predators such as sea otters may ensure that seagrass meadows stay healthy, producing oxygen and benefiting people, us, worldwide. His follow-up studies show that the seagrass in Elkhorn Slough not only thrives, but expands across the estuary floor thanks to the presence of otters. In areas of the slough with more sea otters, the seagrass grows more rapidly, he says. These areas had never had seagrass before and are potentially benefited by the otters. The Elkhorn Slough changed the direction of Brent's scientific career, completely changed the direction. It forced him to take a closer look at seagrass ecosystems and reconsider how species affect one another. By following the clues he found, he discovered that sea otters allow seagrass to survive and even thrive in a stressful environment overloaded with nutrients, and that in turn benefits the entire ecosystem. Brent may have discovered the link, but the sea otters are the heroes. So, sea otters save seagrass ecosystems. We now know why seagrass is important to people. But what does that mean for you? Well, what I would like you guys to do is to rethink your relationship with wildlife. For instance, read about nature, join a webinar like this, volunteer at a rehabilitation center, visit a zoo or an aquarium or a sanctuary, support the recovery of native species. I'm not sure where all of you live. I know you're probably all over the country. Maybe you're not near the Pacific Ocean like I am, but maybe there's a native species near you that needs help, toads, or maybe even a predator. Maybe you live in the middle of the country where they're trying to restore black-footed ferret populations or prairie dog populations. Maybe you live on the Atlantic coast where seabirds are affected. So maybe there's a species near you that needs your help. It doesn't matter what the species is. If it's endangered, it needs our help. Ranchers and farmers oppose the idea of introducing predators to the environment. There are a lot of sea urchin fishermen, for instance, who do not want to see sea otters return to the Pacific waters because sea otters also eat sea urchins. And by eating sea urchins, sea otters use up more eat those sea urchins, and the farmers can't catch them and sell them. I mean, the fishermen can't catch them and sell them. So we have to start thinking about maybe how we can coexist with these predators. And maybe you're going to be one of the people who grows up and figures out how to study these challenges and think creatively about ways to reduce conflicts between humans and predators. Many wildlife species become endangered because their habitats are lost. So maybe you can be one of those people that preserves habitats or gets rid of invasive species that threaten the habitats of certain species. Maybe you can encourage your parents not to use pesticides on your gardens, but use organic fertilizers. Organic fertilizers and organic pest control ideas release more slowly, and they don't wash away as fast. And if they do wash away into the watershed that the creeks, the streams, the rivers, the ocean, then they won't do as much harm as chemical fertilizers or pesticides. Another thing about that kind of jives really nicely with another book I wrote, Plastic Ahoy. Limit your use of single-use plastics. In California here, we have a plastic bag ban. We're not allowed to use plastic bags anymore. If we need a bag, we have to buy it. And so maybe you could rethink your single-use plastic bag use. Elkhorn Slough Foundation is doing good work. You're absolutely right. Thank you for sharing that link, Valerie. Maybe instead of bringing a water bottle to school that you toss each day, you could A, recycle that water bottle, or B, bring a reusable water bottle instead. Maybe instead of wrapping your sandwich in a plastic baggie, you could wrap it in foil, which you can recycle, or a wax paper bag, which will degrade in the landfill. Plastic will not degrade in the landfill. And lastly, observe nature. Get outside, play, take a nature hike, walk by the ocean, walk in a park, visit a natural park, learn to appreciate nature. Bend down and look at those bugs that are crawling on the leaves, or poke your eyeballs into a hole in a tree. Learn to investigate, learn to examine, learn to appreciate the cycles of nature, and learn to appreciate how everything is linked together. I think that's what I'm trying to say here in Sea Otter Heroes. Things are linked in ways that we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. So be open to finding out new things. So I'd like to end there, but I think I've saved plenty of time for questions. So fire away. Type out some questions for me. Maybe I wasn't clear on something. Maybe you want to know a little bit more about me. I'm open. How did you decide to become an author from the Elgin High School? Well, that's kind of a long story. I'll shorten it a little bit for you. When my children were really little, we went to the library every week, and we checked out the maximum number of books. I forget if it was 60 books or 80 books, but we brought home a giant stack of books every single week, and we read through all of them. My kids are readers even today. And one time while I was sitting on the sofa reading with my kids, my mother-in-law was visiting from Florida, and she said to me, you know, you could do this. And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean I could do this? She said, you could write books for kids. So I tried it. And sure enough, I could. And you know, I've never looked back. I really love the job. It's one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. But I absolutely love writing for kids. And I found something I'm really excited about with this headline science because it affects all of us so deeply. Give me another question. Glenbrook says, we are starting a recycling composting project. Yay! At our school. Do you have any tips? Well, recycling and composting is a habit that has to be formed, right? And like any habit, you need constant reminders. So maybe clear signs, maybe different color barrels in different locations within the school, maybe posters around the school, maybe even, and this might be really fun, you guys could write a skit about the correct behavior that you want to see your classmates perform and make a little movie out of it that airs on your school website that teachers can show to the other students in school. So have fun with it. You know, we're trying to change people's minds. They don't want to be beaten over the head with you must do this, you must do this. Make it fun. Make it make sense. Make them feel good about what they're doing. Does that help? And Glenbrook also asked, do you write only nonfiction books? I have a couple of fiction books out. A couple of my earliest books, Jingle the Brass and Nugget on the Flight Deck, are fiction, but I actually did a lot of research for those books as well. Jingle the Brass is about the old-fashioned steam railroads and the slang that engineers used to use when they talked. And Nugget on the Flight Deck is pretty similar. I had a friend who was a fighter pilot in the Navy, and they have their very own language. And I just love the sounds of these different words. So I wrote Jingle the Brass for railroaders, and I wrote Nugget on the Flight Deck for fighter pilots. Our class is over. Thank you very much. Bye, says the STEM Early College. Bye. Thank you for coming. And what's your favorite animal from Glenbrook? Let's see. Gosh, my favorite animal. That might have to be the elephant. Might have to be the elephant. I think they're so smart. I love the way they move. I love the way they have family groups. I love the way they communicate. And by the way, I have another book coming out in 2018 about elephants. So I would have to say it would be the elephant. But I really love all animals. I love tigers. I love lions. I love dogs. So I love the birds that come to my bird feeder in my yard. So that's a little bit about me. Any more questions? Elephants are a favorite of mine. Time for our lunch. Goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Looks like I still have a few people in the room. Anybody else have questions? All right, well then I think we'll say goodbye. Thanks so much for attending. I really appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, you can always email me, newmanbooks@live.com. Bye-bye.